Good evening, everybody, and welcome members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Committee. Before we begin, just like to remind all attendees, those joining by Zoom particularly, they should have cameras and microphones turned off until invited to speak. And for your own privacy, camera backgrounds should be set to blurred. My name is Penny Rivers, and I am the chair of this committee. Members, please raise your hands to indicate that you wish to speak and keep your microphones on mute when you are not speaking. Please keep questions brief and to the point. And ward councillors, please sit separately from the committee when applications in your own wards are being considered and voted on. Mobile phones should be on mute. If there is a fire alarm, then we're not expecting one, but we will go out and calmly and proceed to the Berries field. This meeting is being webcast and will be capable of repeated viewing. So if you are seated in the council chamber, it is likely cameras will capture your image. You are deemed to have consented, and the use of these images and the sound recordings will be webcast and for training purposes. Agenda number 1, apologies for absence. Kim, are there any?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from councillors Keane, Hosseini, Munro, Steiger, Sullivan and White. We have councillor David Beeman attending as substitute.
Thank you. Committee, do you approve the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes.
Is that agreed?
Yes.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest? I think we probably all have to recognise in the last application tonight that we are all colleagues of the applicant. Is that sufficient, Glenn? Is that understood, everyone? Yep, thank you. Questions by members of the public? There are none, and there are no questions from members either. So we come to agenda item 6, which is relevant updates. Claire.
So, Chair, I don't have any updates for you this evening.
Thank you. And I'm sure you have all noted the appeals decisions. Is that correct? Thank you. So we come to our applications, and just as a little reminder, we need to consider everything fairly, openly and apolitically, and approach each planning application with an open mind, avoiding any preconceived opinions. As set out in our public speaking procedure rules, may I also remind public speakers that they should be mindful of the need to avoid making any public statements which could be construed as defamatory or offensive, and should refrain from making allegations regarding individual officers or councillors. It is sad to have to remind people, but we do need to. So we come to our applications, and the first is WA 2025-00805 Ruffold Farm in Cranley. And this is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access and layout for the erection of 63 residential units, which includes 19 affordable ones, and with a widened access point, associated parking and cycle storage, etc. Joanna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. As mentioned, this is an outline planning application with all matters reserved except access and layout, which are to be determined at this stage, for the erection of 63 residential units, including 19 affordable units, a widened access point and other associated development. The site layout is shown in red on the plan on the left-hand side of your screen. Other land that is within the applicant's control is also outlined in blue. And there is a small version of the aerial photograph of the site. The next slide has a larger version of the aerial photograph of the site, so you can see the site in more context. To the north of the site is a garden centre. Just to the west of the site is the land within the blue line, which is Ruffold Farm, which is a Grade 2 listed building. To the east of the site is Guildford Road, and further east to the site is residential development, which is existing. And you can see that the site just lies to the north of the settlement of Cranley, which you can see in the southern part of the slide there. These are some of the constraints for the site. You have the listed building, which is Ruffold Farm, which is Grade 2 listed. You have a number of 2 TPOs on the site, and these encompass individual trees and 2 woodlands and also groups of trees. They are mostly around the boundaries of the site, but you can see on the screen there that the dots in the middle of the site, they are also trees that are covered by the tree preservation order. The conservation area is just to the eastern part of that slide, which is the blue line. You have a footpath, a public right of way that goes through the southern part of the site. And there is also a bridle way, which is the Downs link, which is in the southwestern part, beyond the southwestern boundary of the site. The next slide shows the existing access into the site. The photograph on the left-hand side is viewed from Guildford Road. So you can see the access road and the piers in the distance. And on the right-hand side, you can see the piers that's looking from within the site, looking out towards Guildford Road. As mentioned, access is to be determined at this stage, and the proposed access plan or the proposed access details are to widen the existing access. So those piers that were in the photograph, they would be removed. The existing access is 4.5 metres in width, and that would be widened to 5 metres. And there would be a footway on the northern side of the access, which would be 2 metres in width. And this would link to the bus stop, which is just to the north of the site on Guildford Road. You can see on the plan on the left-hand side there that there would be an informal crossing across Guildford Road, just to the north of the access of the site, and there'll be some minor alterations to the existing bus stop to ensure it can all be accommodated within the highway. The slide or the small plan on the right-hand side of that slide shows some of the other informal improvements to Guildford Road towards Cranley. These include the widening of the footway on the eastern side of Guildford Road and some informal crossing points as well. Just on the left-hand side of the next slide are those alterations in a little bit more detail. You can see the footway on the northern side, and that would be within the highway land, and that would link to the bus stop, and the bus stop would be altered to provide the footway. The 2 photographs on the right-hand side, the top photograph shows Guildford Road to the north, which has the garden centre in the distance with the bus stop, and then the photograph at the bottom shows Guildford Road to the south. The next slide shows the proposed layout for the site. So layout is also to be determined at this stage. The layout forms a loop road with all the dwellings proposed fronting that loop road. The layout also includes some open space in the northern part of the site with a formal play area, which is a locally equipped area of play. The layout has been designed to minimise tree loss. There are 2 veteran trees on the site, and they are located in the southern part of the site, here and here. You can see that on the screen. Those are the 2 veteran trees, and they have a 15-metre buffer zone to them. Other substantial trees on the site are located in this position here, and you have the retained woodland here. Attenuation pond for surface water drainage is proposed in the southeastern corner of the site. That's the lowest part of the site, although the site is relatively level. And the layout has again been designed to retain the trees along the northern and western boundaries as well, and predominantly the eastern boundary, which is very substantial mature tree belt. And because that is also important for ecology, there is a 15-metre buffer zone comprising the gardens along that eastern boundary as well. The public right of way would be retained on its definitive route. That's not proposed to be diverted. And the public footpath links to Cranley Common in the southeastern corner of the site, and it links to the Downs Link long distance route and bridleway in the western boundary of the site. I have some photographs of the site as well. So moving on, we have on the left-hand side, we have Ruffold Lodge, which is an existing dwelling. That's within the application site. So those brick piers will be removed to allow the widening of the access, and there'll be a 2-metre footway in front of Ruffold Lodge. So that would provide some separation distance from people exiting that property onto the footway, as you would perhaps with a terraced house or any other type of dwelling. The photograph on the right-hand side shows the northern part of the site. In between the two trees, substantial trees on the right-hand side of that photo is where the access will come into the site, between those trees. The next slide again is taken more or less from the centre of the site, again looking north, and you can see on the right hand side of that photograph the mature tree belt to the eastern side of the site, and Guildford Road is beyond that tree belt. The next slide shows photographs looking towards the northwest. You can see on the little plan, that's the arrow on the left-hand side. The building you can see there is an outbuilding, which is within the grounds of Ruffold Farm, which is the listed building. And then the photograph on the right-hand side is facing east, and the trees in the distance there are the woodland area that is to be retained just to the north of the attenuation pond, and that's covered by the tree preservation as well. The next slide shows the view of Ruffold Lodge, which is the Grade 2 listed building, taken from the sort of southwestern corner of the site, looking northwest. You can see that the views are filtered by the mature trees that exist on the boundary and within the site. The officer report does deal with the heritage aspects. The application has been subject to consultation with the heritage officer, and in this case the planning benefits are considered to outweigh the heritage harm in this particular instance. Slide on the right hand side there is the public right of way. You can probably just make out beyond the chain link fence that there is some slight depression in the grass where the public right of way is used, and that's looking southeast towards Cranley Common, but you can't see it because it's beyond the trees in the distance on that slide. There is a brief update sheet for this item. It proposes an additional informative and an alteration to condition 2. In summary, Chair, given the lack of the 5-year housing land supply, the tilted balance is engaged by this application, and the planning balance is set out in section 33 of the officer report. This lists the planning harms and the weight to be given to those, along with the planning benefits and also the weight to be given to those. Overall, in this particular case, and given the tilted balance, the weight to be given to the benefits of the scheme there are not considered to be any harms which would significantly or demonstrably outweigh those benefits. Therefore, subject to the prior completion of the section 106 to secure the mitigations and the conditions, and in accordance with the tilted balance, it is recommended that planning permission should be granted. The recommendation is as set out on the agenda, subject to the alterations on the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There are 3 speakers. The first is Mr. Tim Dawes. Mr. Dawes, you have 4 minutes from when you start speaking.
Good evening, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is an outline application, and we respectfully remind members that only access and layout are to be considered tonight. In the last 14 months, our team has worked diligently with council officers to produce a quality scheme that provides 63 units in a highly contained site on the edge of the Cranley urban area. The main benefits of the scheme are as follows: a well-spaced 63-house scheme that provides for a policy-compliant mix of dwellings which will create a strong sense of place. A naturally screened site contained from Guildford Road and surrounding areas. 30% affordable housing weighted towards social rent in line with the council's housing team's wishes. Minimal tree loss, only 5 trees for removal, 4 of which are category C trees. Significant measures in respect of ecology with the provision of a 15-metre back corridor along the eastern boundary and mitigation by agreeing a sensitive lighting scheme. The provision of open space incorporating a 400 square metre leap. And the proposal also offers some significant highway improvements. The main site is not heavily constrained as it's not Greenbelt land and is deemed countryside beyond the Greenbelt. The Greenbelt boundary follows the access in and stops at the joint boundary of Ruffold Farm with the land. There are no landscape designations associated with the land, and it's also not in a conservation area. Ruffold Farm, a Grade 2 listed building, lies outside the red line and is located some 30 metres from the nearest joint boundary, and there is almost 50 metres from Ruffold Farm to the nearest new dwelling. There is established screening between the two. The land's context is important next to Knock Cuts Garden Centre, which has a significant amount of retail space and sizable buildings, accompanied by large areas of parking and outdoor plant areas. The site is in a highly sustainable location within easy walking distance of Cranley High Street, with bus stops by the entrance to the land. The new dwellings would not be isolated from services. A wide-ranging TPO was placed on the application site by the council's tree officer once the application was submitted, and following amendments and a reduction in housing numbers, the tree officer lifted their objection on the basis that most of the trees will be retained. The land is classified as flood zone 1, which means the land has a low probability of flooding. The drainage strategy across the site and accepted by the lead flood authority is for the whole site to drain to a single large attenuation pond with a restricted rate of discharge. One concern with the scheme is the council's heritage officer's opinion that the scheme would weaken the listed building's relationship with the rural landscape and reduce its openness, resulting in moderate to high heritage harm. However, our heritage consultant, Asset Heritage Consulting, disagrees and considers that any harm arising from the reduced numbers of units would be at the lower end of the less than substantial category. In any event, in our view, any such harm would be clearly outweighed by the scheme's public benefits, a conclusion supported by the officer report. The proposal would provide a policy-compliant mix of market and affordable homes at a time when the council cannot demonstrate 5 years of deliverable housing sites. At a supply of 1.28 years, there is a pressing need for the supply of new housing to be increased, and it is sites such as this on the edge of the urban area that need to be conceded and granted permission to provide for more housing. The council's spatial strategy confirms this to be the case. Given the council's housing shortfall and out-of-date plan, the tilted balance in paragraph 11 of the NPPF is engaged. The 63 homes, sustainable location, policy compliant 19 affordable homes, and economic benefits carry substantial positive weight. Together, these clearly outweigh the 5 identified harms in the officer's planning balance, 4 of which attracted a limited weight and only Greenbelt harm substantial weight. The 5 identified harms in the officer report do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the identified public benefits. This high-quality 63-house scheme works within the site's natural features, delivers much-needed housing in the borough, and will create a sustainable community. Its clear material benefits outweigh any identified harm, and we respectfully ask councillors to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawes. Our next speaker is Councillor Rosemary Burbridge. And Councillor Burbridge, you also have 4 minutes from when you start speaking. One moment, you could put your
Oh,
mic, that's it.
Sorry, am I supposed to push something? Is it right? Can you hear me? Yes. Good. All the comments I'm going to make refer to the local plan, Part 1, 2018. I haven't read it, but I think you all have read it. This is the 3rd time this has come up. First of all, for 20 houses, which were turned down, then for 73, and now we're down to 78, now we're down to 53, something like that. Okay, number 1, It would harm the local landscape features of Merritt and the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside, LP, RE1 and RE2. It is contrary to policy, TD1. The policy in this area of Surrey is to have large and beautiful boundaries between villages, e.g. between Ewhurst and Cranley, Cranley and Rowley, Rowley and Shamley Green and Shamley Green and Wannish, to name but a few. Secondly, it has not been demonstrated that the development provides safe and suitable pedestrian access for all users. The road has a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. None of the rest of our houses are in that sort of area. And there are bends in the road on either side of the site. It would be unsafe for a mother with 2 or 3 children and a buggy to cross the road safely. It is therefore contrary to policy ST1, and at present there are no footpaths at all on that side of the road. Third, it is also not providing safe and suitable vehicle access due to bends in the road. It's contrary to policy to ST1. Parking on the site is limited. For example, if a child or adult wants to have a party, it would be hard to find space for parents dropping off and collecting the children or adults wishing to park, especially for people who want to stay to the whole party. Cars parked outside homes could block emergency vehicles if there were too many. Ruffold Farm is a Grade 2 listed building and we should take care of it. Children could not walk safely to local schools as they would have to cross the busy road to use a footpath and cross many roads. And I'm just looking carefully at the time. Thames Water have also shown concern about having any more houses built in the Guildford Road at the present. Any of you who've driven locally down Cranley, Guildford Road in Cranley will see that for many months it has been dug up. They have huge problems there, not just with the area they're working on, but then they find a burst further down. And Thames Water are finding it very hard in that area to produce the water. I know you're not supposed to mention Thames Water, but I have, and you can tick me off afterwards. Now, I have spent hours preparing this short statement because I remember 2 things. One is that some of you will remember, if you're as old as I am, that there was a child who crossed the Guildford Road thinking it was safe, and she died. And that was a bit further along the road. And secondly, when we moved to Cranley in 1974, many of you who know Cranley will remember the Nightingale family. Very, very, even he had a road named after him, so he must have been amazing. I knew his daughter. She said, Rosemary, when you move to Cranley, make sure that your house is in a safe place where you can actually walk into the village. She lived a few houses down just the other side of Knockcuts. If you know, that's the garden centre near this development. And she was afraid to walk to and from the village. It is very dark. Even if they put a footpath on that side, I would not want my teenage daughter to walk home alone along there. It is very deserted. There's a large area of common. And I do hope that again, you will throw this one out. You've done it twice. And we are extremely concerned about this in Cranley. And I've got 7 seconds left, but you can have back. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Liz Townsend, do you wish to speak?
Thank you. And just to make it clear that I'm speaking as the ward councillor and I am not a member of this committee, I'd like to make a few brief points. Firstly, this application is for development outside the Cranley settlement, as has already been mentioned, and I think it's extremely disappointing that we are considering major residential development beyond the settlement boundary when the Cranley Neighbourhood Plan was only made in July 2024. Secondly, despite Thames Water's consultation response, I remain unconvinced that the wastewater infrastructure can adequately accommodate this development. Residents in Cranley, like those in Orfold, continue to experience sewage backing up in their homes and overflowing into their gardens. Yet, from Thames Water's response to this application, you could be forgiven for thinking that everything is operating perfectly. The public evidence suggests otherwise. Over recent months, I've been engaging extensively with Thames Water, the Environment Agency and Ofwat regarding Cranley sewage treatment works. That work has established a number of regulatory and operational concerns, including Environment Agency permit breaches, concerns over the reliability of event duration monitoring, that's dumping sewage in our rivers, delayed and legally required water industry national environmental programme investment, and ongoing regulatory scrutiny by Ofwat. This is not simply my opinion. Ofwat's enforcement investigation concluded that Thames Water had breached its legal obligations and imposed a financial penalty of over 120 million. Cranley Sewage Treatment Works was specifically identified within that decision as one of the sites demonstrating those failures. My most recent correspondence from Thames Water also states that without undertaking flow monitoring within the local sewer network, it is not possible to provide an accurate assessment of the available network capacity. I do not find that particularly reassuring when we are being asked to make decisions about accommodating further growth. I also have to express my frustration with Thames Water's inconsistency regarding water supply. During the course of this application, its consultation response changed significantly. Earlier responses identified insufficient water network capacity and requested a planning condition requiring network upgrades or an agreed infrastructure phasing plan before occupation. That requirement subsequently disappeared without any explanation in the planning papers. Given my wider concerns regarding wastewater infrastructure and the lack of transparency around future investment, I find that deeply concerning. Taken together, the regulatory findings, the experiences of local residents and the continuing uncertainty surrounding infrastructure capacity means that wastewater infrastructure in Cranley should be an important consideration when deciding this application. Should the committee be minded to approve this application, I would ask that consideration is given to a planning condition requiring confirmation prior to occupation that adequate foul drainage infrastructure and water treatment capacity are available to serve the development, or that any necessary reinforcement works have been completed and are operational. Finally, I must express my disappointment that this development is unable to deliver the statutory 10% biodiversity net gain on site. This is not a constrained urban brownfield site. It is a green field development in a rural setting. In those circumstances, I would have expected a scheme that delivered the biodiversity uplift within the site itself. This represents a missed opportunity. We should expect developments in rural locations to demonstrate genuine environmental enhancement on site, not simply offsetting biodiversity gains elsewhere. Residents rightly expect development in the countryside to enhance that countryside. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, over to you. Councillor Clark.
Are we in the questions of clarity part of the meeting?
We could be.
Thank you. Well, I have two questions. I noticed in the paper somewhere that the applicant is going to provide £40,000 towards maintenance and lighting of the Downs Link. Would that be part? My question is, would that be part of 106, or would it be enforceable in some other way? And then, secondly, listening to Councillor Townsend, I would certainly support a condition, as she described, in terms of making sure that Thames Water can provide some comfort before the site is ready for people to access it. So the question is, can we put a condition on?
Thank you. In response to the first question, yes, the £40,000 is highways contribution recommended by the County Highway Authority to secure surfacing and lighting improvements to the Downs link. So I think most major schemes in Cranley tend to have that contribution, and the Downs link is just to the southwest part of this site. That would be secured as part of the Section 106 that is recommended. In respect of the condition, if members consider that that is justified, then that could be included in the conditions list. I suspect the reason for their change in consultation response may have been because there was a slight reduction in the numbers. I don't know whether they operate at a particular threshold for their comments. Similarly, I think the healthcare consultation response, they had a request originally, and then when the numbers went down, that fell below the thresholds that they are working to for seeking contributions. That possibly could be the answer, but if the committee agree or want to vote, then a condition could be included in the recommendation or the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spence. Was yours also a question on clarity?
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, my question of clarity is that there's a reference to, I think, the small element of common land that I believe is Waverley owned that might need to be sold or given access to. My question is there a financial benefit that Waverley would receive from that? And is that something that's material to our considerations? So that's my first.
Okay, can I just confirm on that one? It's absolutely not material to your considerations and not something in terms of monetary costs that we'd be able to advise you on at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that clear. The second one, I'd just like to associate myself with Councillor Clark's comments about the a discharge of condition for the foul water. I'm also cognizant, I think we had a previous discussion in an earlier planning committee that where the water authority had not given the adequate evidence. So I would like, if that we're going to go ahead with that condition, that we include some language that says the council, if that evidence is not forthcoming, the council has the ability to refuse the discharge of condition. Thank you.
Just to sort of confirm on the condition point, as is the case with any planning condition, if the applicant hasn't put forward adequate evidence to enable the planning authority to discharge that condition, then we would refuse it, and you don't need to actually put specific wording into the condition. That's just the way the process would work.
Are there any other questions? No. So the floor is open to debate. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chairman. This is very difficult. I don't like this at all. For all sorts of reasons. In fact, I'm getting very depressed really with all the sites that we're giving permission to, and all you see in front is this enormous attenuation pond, size of an Olympic swimming pool, with usually life belts sort of there, but because it's so deep compared to whatever we thought we were putting in at one time. And I just get so worried really about what the quality of what we're actually producing. I don't like where this site is, and I can understand fully why we've protected it in the past. I'm not sure we can protect it now in the same way. I think, if I remember rightly, we had 5.8 years of housing land supply not that long ago when we were looking at this in the early stages. We're now, as somebody's pointed out, down to 1.28. We haven't got up to date local plan, but the neighbourhood plan is up to date. And it's really a question, again, as we know, in the situation we find ourselves in, that it's the balance, and we have to prove, you know, really comprehensively that the balance, that there would be more harm to the borough than gain from this. And I think we would have a great deal of difficulty making the case, much as I don't like it. I don't like where it is. I know this is only outline and layout can change, but to me, it's the usual unimaginative. I mean, you can almost see it before it's built, can't you? Because it's replicated across the borough, usually just on the fields outside the town. So I'll wait and hear what other people say, but I think we're on very thin ice if we feel that we can't back this one in the situation in which the borough finds itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Clark.
As always, it's benefits versus harm. And benefits in this occasion, I think, is more than just housing numbers. It is, God forbid, where it is situated. I went on the site visit yesterday, and certainly, notwithstanding the infrastructure on sewage, I think there would be an almighty rush to buy and rent these houses in this particular site. I know it's old farmland. I don't think any food crops have been grown there for 25 years. It's not been used for grazing for some time. I think the owners just cut the grass every now and then for animal feed. So I can understand exactly what Councillor Coburn is saying. It is a site which is beautiful, but it's also a site where people would find it beautiful to live. There is access, the public footpath to the Downs Link obviously has to be retained, and it is retained. And I know that the applicant has stated that the public have access to the site. So if they bring their speedos, they can swim in the pond. So it is tricky, and I think bearing in mind the previous conversation about Thames Water and getting some evidence before access is permitted to residents, I can't see how we can refuse this.
Thank you. No other speakers? No other speakers. Councillor Townsend, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Chair and members. I do think, that it is sad that this site is being put forward for development. However, we do live in very different times where development is concerned. I do appreciate that. However, I would say that this is on the gateway into Cranley, and at the moment it does create a rural feel coming into Cranley. And I would urge members as well that for the access road, if we could request that any surfacing, if you are minded to approve this, is not just black tarmac. Any surfacing across the common should be in a sympathetic material to the common, so as not to create that really urbanising effect. And I think that is something that should be protected. The properties are in some way hidden by the trees, but equally just black tarmac going across the common would create a very urbanising effect there as you come into Cranley. I would also say, and this may have been achieved already, but the social rent side of the affordable housing, I would hope that is firmly tied down in the Section 106 agreement, and so that it can't be affected under, let's hope, under viability, if that should come along later in the day. I would be very disappointed to see this site if it is agreed, but equally, I would thank members for considering the Thames Water condition. Thank you.
Members, just to advise, condition 19 on the report actually requires submission of details of all street materials, including surfacing, manufactured colour, finish, etc., sample of materials. So that is covered by condition 19.
So we have the recommendation and there are conditions, and we've discussed the additional condition about Thames Water. So firstly, do we agree to include the condition about Thames Water? Yes. Agreed. So with the recommendation that delegated authority is granted to the Assistant Director of Planning to grant outline planning permissions subject to the completion of the Section 106 legal agreement and conditions, including the extra one, do we agree that recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. That's 7 in favour and 1 against, no abstentions.
So that is carried. Our next application is WA 2026-00450 Briar Cottage, Bullhead Green Road, Brook. And this is for the erection of an outbuilding with associated decking area incidental to the use of the dwelling known as Briar Cottage. And this is retrospective. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so this application has been referred to the Planning Committee due to the number of objections received. It relates to Briar Cottage, Bullhead Green Road, Brook, Godalming, GU8 5UW. It is a retrospective application for the erection of an outbuilding with associated decking area incidental to the use of the dwelling known as Briar Cottage. So as you can see here, we have the site location. So the application site is part of our existing row of properties located on the south side of Bullhead Green Road. It is within the Surrey Hills National Landscape AONB and the area of great landscape value. It has also been appropriately assessed against Greenbelt policy as it is located within the Greenbelt outside any defined settlement area. Also shown are the existing separation distances from the neighbouring boundaries. So here we have the existing block plan, again showing in more detail the separation distances from the neighbouring boundaries, but also the separation distance from the main dwelling itself, significantly separated by 36 metres approximately. So here we have site photographs taken from the rear cartilage of the application site. On the image on the far left is an image of, shows the garden rear view from the outbuilding towards the southern elevation of the main dwelling. The image center is a view of the northern front elevation of the existing outbuilding. And the image on the right is a garden rear view from the southern elevation of the main dwelling towards the northern elevation of the outbuilding. And again, site photographs showing the existing relationship with neighbouring sites. The image on the left is the front elevation taken from the front elevation of the existing outbuilding towards the rear of neighbouring Apple Tree Cottage, which is located to the east. And the image on the right is a view from the front elevation of the existing outbuilding towards the rear of neighbouring North End, located to the west. So here we have the proposed ground floor and roof plans. We have the proposed elevations as existing. So yeah, the recommendation is that permission be granted subject to conditions and informatives as set out on pages 116 to 117 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have some speakers. We have a Mr. Chris Barrett, who is, I think, online.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes, you have 4 minutes, Mr. Barrett.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Chris Barrett and I live at Coronation Cottage, directly adjoining the application site. I registered to speak to the committee this evening to represent an entire row of neighbours shocked by the recommendation before you. We are told that this 53.9 metre square construction, which encompasses a permanent steel frame structure, is a summer house. For years, my family and neighbours enjoyed complete privacy on our rear aspects, looking out over a protected landscape. Today, we are faced with an imposing 4.15 metre tall building sitting just centimetres from property lines, completely dominating our narrow plots and directly overlooking our bedrooms and main living spaces. This is not a subordinate garden shed. It is a substantial, independent, habitable building constructed without a shred of community consultation and with planning permission only sought retrospectively after neighbour complaints to Waverley Borough Council. The officer's report acknowledges that this development is inappropriate in the Metropolitan Greenbelt and an area of great landscape value. Therefore, by law, it can only be approved if the applicant demonstrates very special circumstances that clearly outweigh the harm. The applicant's primary justification for very special circumstances rests on the functional need for garden storage and a home office. Members, I urge you to look at the floor plans. This building contains a fully functioning kitchen, a bar, a toilet, and a shower room. Since when do lawnmowers, garden tools, and desks require primary drainage installations, a shower cubicle, and a kitchen sink? The argument that a fully plumbed, independent living space is required for unmet storage needs is entirely contradictory. This is an abuse of planning definitions. If the applicant genuinely required an incidental garden office or tool storage, they could have constructed a standard compliant 2.5 metre wooden structure that respects the landscape and the 2 metre boundary rule, just as every other resident of Brook has done for decades. During the planning officer's report, he continually refers to this development as being similar to neighbouring sheds. We have provided 4 photographs this evening, and I hope that you can see them now. By recommending approval, the planning department is effectively bypassing two of Waverley's most vital protections. Firstly, the Greenbelt 40% rule. Briar Cottage has already been extended heavily in 2017. This massive additional footprint pushes the property vastly over the cumulative threshold for disproportionate overdevelopment. Secondly, the Greenbelt Supplementary Plan document, which explicitly states that outbuildings must lack the required the required facilities for independent living, unless special circumstances can be proven. This structure explicitly contains them. If this committee grants permission tonight, you are setting a dangerous precedent for Brook and the wider borough. We are not anti-development, we are pro-policy. The rules are there to protect the environment and the rights of neighbours. This building flagrantly violates those rules and will be used as an extra habitable living space. On behalf of all the objecting neighbours, I urge the committee to reject the officer's recommendation, refuse this application, and uphold the integrity of Waverley's development plan. Thank you. Can I just confirm that you can see those 4 photographs?
The photographs were circulated to the members before the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Anil van der Merwe. You two have 4 minutes from when you start.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Anil van der Merwe, and together with my husband Willem, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening in support of our application. Firstly, we fully respect the proposed planning condition that the garden room must remain ancillary to Briar Cottage and must never be used as a separate dwelling or for commercial purposes. From the outset, that has always been our intention. Our garden room is not and has never been intended to become an independent home. It has no separate access, no separate address, and no separate services. It is reliant on Briar Cottage. I appreciate that this application has generated a number of objections. I would simply ask councillors to note that whilst 13 objections were received from 13 separate addresses, only a small number are from neighbouring properties in close proximity to Briar Cottage. Several of the remaining representations are from addresses many miles away, as far as London and Southampton, whose residents would not experience any direct impact from this development. Nevertheless, the outbuilding does not have enough bulk to result in any harm to any of the neighbouring properties. The planning officer has found there to be sufficient screening from the property to the south and sufficient distances from our immediate neighbours. We put forward very special circumstances as per local plan policy DM14, which states that the council will have regard to the essential needs of householders for garaging, storage, facilities incidental to the enjoyment of their dwelling. These are referred to in the officer's report and accepted as policy compliant. I can confirm that without the outbuilding, we do not have any storage space, which we require for gardening equipment. Most importantly, Briar Cottage has been our family home for the past 16 years. It is where we have raised our 2 daughters, become part of the local community, and invested in making it a home that works for our family. Over the last 4 years, my own life has changed considerably due to a long-term chronic health condition. We have had to rethink what family life looks like and find new ways of spending meaningful time together. Our garden room is where we now spend a significant amount of quality time together, from playing games, building puzzles, and celebrating birthdays. I also use it as quiet space for mindfulness, light exercise, and occasional homeworking. The small WC has made a very practical difference because it allows me to continue enjoying our beautiful garden without repeatedly having to go forth and back to our house. I would like to emphasise that the Surrey Hills AONB officer supports the application and does not consider that the outbuilding would harm the national landscape. Most of our neighbours have similar outbuildings in a similar fashion at the end of their gardens. Our outbuilding sits within this group of existing outbuildings, all of a similar size, scale and design. It is not an overdevelopment of the site, as it sits nicely tucked away at the bottom of our garden, as is common with the neighbouring properties. It therefore clearly follows and respects the existing pattern of development in the area, is in line with the character of the area, and would not appear intrusive to the national landscape. The outbuilding sits on a raised platform and is not a large structure, which largely reduces its vulnerability to flooding as per the flood risk assessment recommendations and good practice. Furthermore, I would like to clarify that the outbuilding has not harmed any trees, and the tree officer has confirmed that there is no evidence to support the suggestion that it has. We are not asking for permission to create another dwelling, rather to retain a garden room that has replaced previous outbuildings and has become an important part of our family life. We therefore respectfully ask you to support your planning officer's recommendation to approve this application. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. Briar Cottage is one of the semi-detached houses in Bullhead Green Road, which is in my ward, so I'm here as the ward councillor. This is a retrospective application for an already constructed deck and summer house outbuilding for incidental use as a games room, home office, additional lounge and leisure space. The application does not explain why any of these uses require a kitchen and a bathroom. This is no small-scale garden shed. Combined with the deck area, it covers 53.9 square metres. The planning statement insists that the outbuilding is in keeping with the character of the site and surrounding areas, though we note that the structure has been built with a steel frame, rubber roofing, large UPVC double glazed doors and windows. I agree some others in the row of semis have small garden tool-sized sheds at the bottoms of their gardens, but none of them have heating, lighting, bathrooms or kitchens. The site lies within the green belt, the Surrey Hills National Landscape, and an area of great landscape value. Local Plan Policy DM14 recognises that other ancillary outbuildings requiring express planning permission are generally inappropriate in the green belt, and that the council must satisfy that very special circumstances exist to justify new outbuildings that do not meet these exceptions. Any new outbuilding must be clearly subordinate to the host dwelling and must not appear intrusive in the landscape. The planning statement argues that this retrospective application meets the test for very special circumstances on the grounds that A, there is no other storage or garaging servicing Briar Cottage, and garden equipment must be stored somewhere. And B, the outbuilding is incidental to the main dwelling and is an essential form of development in the garden of Briar Cottage. I'm not sure that either of these 2 points meet the test for very special circumstances. Yes, garden equipment needs to be stored, but other properties in the terraced area appear to be doing this quite well, with small sheds without bathrooms or kitchens. There is a lengthy objection from a neighbour resident. They set out concerns about the impact they consider the development has had on their view and the significant loss of privacy. They state that neighbours were initially told the structure would be a storage or garden room, but it became clear during construction that a kitchen and bathroom had been included. I therefore recommend that the committee objects to the application. I'm not satisfied that the proposal meets the test for the very special circumstances required under DM14 for outbuildings in the green belt, and I would suggest that the committee ask themselves if the very special circumstances quoted truly are very special circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any questions on clarity? No. Oh, Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. There's a comment in the report that other neighbouring properties have similar buildings at the end of their gardens. Is that a justified comment? Do they have similar buildings in the sense that they have kitchens and gardens and so on, sorry, and bathrooms in these similar buildings or not? And just want clarification on whether how similar the other buildings are to this proposed building.
So if it's helpful just to maybe to put the presentation back up, so you'll see that there are other buildings close by. They look to be smaller. Members, I would guard against getting misled by what is in the said shed or the building, because the kitchen, a kitchen fitment or a toilet could be in any of those buildings. What you're being asked to consider in planning terms is an ancillary outbuilding within the curtilage of a garden. And as members are all aware, as providing it is ancillary to the main use of the dwelling, whether it has, you know, a sink in it, a desk in it, a gym, a fire, it is immaterial to the planning merits of the scheme, providing it remains ancillary to the main dwelling. So I think if you go to the next slide, there's one that shows the two adjoining, which from the pictures look as if they're smaller, but nevertheless, they are ancillary outbuildings in similar locations, with the adjoining gardens obviously having the same landscape same designation in terms of greenbelt.
Thank you. Any other questions? Open to debate then, members. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's the test here. Well, before I talk about the test, I certainly think that this structure has an identity crisis. And if the officer is saying that the other structures are similar, how does he know? So that's just a side comment. There certainly are other structures because I've looked at them at Google. This is certainly not similar. The only similarity is where it's located. And I noticed that policy TD1 of the local plan requires development to be of a high quality design and to be, importantly, well related in size, scale and character to its surroundings. I think, having looked at various photographs, I can't see that this is a high quality design. It's semi-industrial, in fact, with the steel structure and various other unattractive parts. However, I am very sympathetic to the fact that this dwelling doesn't have any storage. But again, I just think it's one step too far. I think this is more than just storage, and therefore perhaps not appropriate development within the green belt.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Coburn.
I think Councillor Clark has raised some of the issues that I have. I mean, we are seeing more and more garden buildings going up, and they push the limits. I mean, this is something that's been going on. They start off and they're quite sort of inobtrusive, and then, you know, they get bigger and bigger. And I think there comes a point where you have to talk to your neighbours and you have to work with a local community. And could we go back to that other one? You know, it is huge. I mean, with the best one in the world, that is a big building. Now, I know it looks bigger because you've got a narrow garden, and in a wider garden, you know, you'd have the opposite, but it is much, much bigger. We had a similar one in Farnham, which was ordered in the end, or asked, or whatever the phrase is, to remove the kitchen because they had ultimately been using it for commercial purposes, letting it out to students, which they thought was a sort of charitable thing to do. It's far too big as a shed. You know, I know we're not supposed to talk about the name of the building or whatever it is. It's a garden building. I think, you know, had this come into this committee and we were looking at whether it was appropriate development, given the views all around, given the scale and the pattern of development of the cottages, I think we would have refused this. I cannot see us agreeing that this is an acceptable size of ancillary development. I have great reservations about this. I really do, on design grounds, on size, and on its effect on the surrounding properties. Thank you.
If there are no other speakers, I'm going to speak myself. It's a bit unusual. The very first site visit I ever did as part of this committee, before I was the chair, was to see a heritage barn that wanted to be extended as part of several other domestic dwellings. And the committee took great exception because the heritage barn was painted black. And I have to say that I had never really had my eyes open to the fact that there are hundreds of heritage barns across this country that are painted black. So I think that is completely in keeping with old barn type buildings, and I have no objection whatsoever to this application. If there are no other speakers, councillor Gale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can just come back on some bits and pieces there. We're told not to take any account of what's inside the actual building, so I understand that. However, the policy DM14, it recognises that ancillary buildings requiring express planning permission, which is obviously what this needs. Whereas the small storage sheds in the other gardens obviously didn't need express planning permission, which is why this needs a very special circumstance to be the size and the location that it's in. So that's what I'd like to say. The very special circumstances, I don't think really exist. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation which we have in front of us is that subject to conditions, permission be granted. When lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Chair. That is 3 in favour, 5 against and no abstentions. Therefore, the recommendation falls.
Would somebody like to give the grounds for objection, please? Councillor Clark.
I think there are two policies here. One is one that I mentioned earlier, which is policy TD1 of the local plan, Part 1, 2018, requires development to be of a high quality design and to be well related in size and scale to the character of its surroundings. The other one would be paragraph 154 of the NPPF, to be a form of inappropriate development within the green belt, which is harmful by definition.
So can I just, please? So members, I think what I've heard you articulate about your concerns is that the retention of the ancillary outbuilding would be of a size and scale that would be out of character.
Can't hear you.
Sorry, I thought I was, but I'm trying to read, so that might be why. So I'll put that up there so that I can speak into the mic and read, but I might not be able to multitask perfectly. The retention of the ancillary outbuilding due to its size and scale, due to the size and scale of the building, would be out of character with the area, and no very special circumstances have been demonstrated for its need. The proposed development would therefore be contrary to policy DM4 and DM14 of the local plan. And DM4 is the design quality space in part 2 of the local plan.
Councillor Clark, do you have a seconder? Councillor Coburn. So we have to vote on that. So committee, we are voting on the grounds for objection as read out by Claire. All in favour of the grounds for objection, please show.
Thank you, Chair. That's 5 in favour, no abstentions and 3 against.
Councillor Clark.
Just a question. It's probably an enforcement question, so it's a question for head of planning. Now that we've reached that decision, will there be circumstances in terms of the alteration of this structure that would then come back to committee or be delegated under delegated decision?
So members, the next decision, which is a delegated decision, is whether or not it's expedient to take enforcement action. And given the nature of the building that you're dealing with, it would be a notice to remove the building rather than under enforcement, i.e. reduce it to a size that would be permitted development. So members, that is sort of the next stage following the refusal of this retrospective application.
Well, I, for one, am very unhappy about that, and I'll put that on record now. Our next application is WA 2026-00451 Ockway, Godalming. This is for the creation of a vehicular access to Ockway and pedestrian access routes. And Joanne. Definitely Joanne. Yes, Joanne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a full application for the creation of vehicular access to Ockway and pedestrian access routes as well. This application is associated with a planning application that was submitted to Guildford Borough Council for 234 dwellings. This application, along with the application that was submitted to Guildford Borough Council, have been called in for determination by the Secretary of State, who will hold an inquiry to determine both the applications. Therefore, in the same way as for an appeal against non-determination, it is necessary for this council to consider the proposal and agree what decision it would have made had we been the determining authority. The aerial photograph is on the site. So the site lies on the very edge of the borough in Godalming. The blue areas there denote the extent of this application. So the most southerly point is the vehicular access proposed, and then there are four to the north of that, 4 pedestrian accesses proposed. This plan shows those accesses in more detail. So you can see on the middle part of that slide, you've got the top 3 areas. They are the extent of that proposal is literally hard surfacing to create those pedestrian links to the existing footway that exists on Ockway. In the bottom middle of that slide, you can see the proposed access. So the proposed access is a conventional bell mouth vehicular access with an informal pedestrian crossing and some grass verges. The extent of the site that is within Waverley Borough is only those areas that are within the red line shown on that slide. This is a photograph that is looking south on Ockway. So the vehicular access would just be somewhere to the right hand side on that photograph. You can see that there is already a highway and footways in the vicinity of the site. And again, this is looking north on Ockway. So this is looking towards where those pedestrian route links would link to the existing footway that is also already on the western side of Ockway. This slide just shows you the extent of the application that is within Guildford Borough. So the site is right on the boundary of the borough with Guildford. So the application that has been submitted to Guildford Borough is for the 234 dwellings. Also, just to note, there is a secondary access, vehicular access that is proposed to the southwest of that plan onto Eashing Lane. So the only matter for consideration for this committee is those areas that are within the red line, just on the right-hand side of that plan. There is a correction on the committee update sheet, which is just a correction to the planning history. Otherwise, the recommendation is as set out on the agenda, in that permission is recommended that permission would have been granted subject to the conditions had this council been the determining authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have several speakers. The first is Mr. Douglas McKillop. You have 4 minutes from when you start.
Chair, councillors, thank you. I speak as a resident of Otway and I ask you to not accept the officer recommendation. This is described as an access application, of vehicular access and a couple of footpaths. It is not. The officer report confirms at the outset that it is directly associated with the Guildford application 25P01474 for 234 dwellings that the Guildford members resolved to refuse. This access is the mechanism that makes those homes work. Without it, the scheme as presented does not function. I want to draw your attention to one sentence in your officer's own report. It says that if this committee agrees with the recommendation to grant, the council is not expected to need to be represented at the public inquiry. That is the real decision in front of you. A vote to support the recommendation risks Waverley having no active voice at the inquiry that decides this development. A resolution that Waverley would have refused or would have only granted subject to firm obligations keeps Waverley at the table defending its residents, and it stands as a material consideration the Inspector and the Secretary of State must weigh. Guildford's refusal already carries that weight. Waverley's position should too. The unfairness is structural. The homes sit in Guildford, the burden sits in Waverley. The traffic runs through Otway, Arons Hill and Ishing Lane. The pressure falls on Godalming schools, roads and services. Godalming Town Council saw this. On the 9th of April, it asked for the decision to be deferred until cross-boundary planning gain was agreed with Waverley and for contributions towards St Mark and All Saints School, a multi-use games area and local highway improvements. Your officer's answer is that all of that can be resolved later through the call-in process and that the access itself needs no mitigation. But this access is not separate from the 234 homes. It is an integral part of how their impact is delivered into Waverley, and the obligations that should compensate Waverley are being controlled entirely across the border in Guildford. Remember what Otford Park itself had to provide when it was approved. Substantial Section 106 obligations towards local roads and local schools, including £922,236 on roads, £939,306 to Broadwater School, and £864,452 to what is now St Mark's and All Saints Primary School. That's roughly £1.8 million to 2 local schools alone. Guildford's officers have not followed your lead. Their proposed Section 106 secures no primary or secondary school contributions at all. Their own education authority calls the position very regrettable, but has no projects to fund it against. And on roads, yes, there is a package of works at the site access and a £30,000 traffic order contribution. But look at what it is. A frontage crossing, a speed limit, a footway. It mitigates the entrance to the estate, it does nothing for the wider network into Godalming that will carry this traffic, and it comes nowhere near the near £1 million contribution that Otford Park was required to make for a scheme of comparable size next door. On adoption, your report says only that the applicant anticipates that part of Otway may become adopted highway during the life of the development. Anticipates is not a condition, it is not enforceable, and it protects no one. So my request is this: resolve that Waverley would have refused. If you will not go that far, resolve that Waverley would only have supported this access subject to binding obligations on road adoption, maintenance, construction damage and cross-boundary contribution to Godalming schools and infrastructure. Please do not let this be waved through as a technicality, and please do not let Waverley walk away from the public inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate Moody, you too have 4 minutes.
Chair, councillors, this is a complex case with huge consequences for local residents. I'm asking today that you give it the scrutiny it deserves. Your officers will tell you to judge this only as an access road, but the access has a clear purpose: to connect 234 new homes into Waverley. Evaluating the access in isolation runs a real risk that Guildford assesses the houses, Waverley assesses an access point, but nobody assesses the combined burden on Waverley, communities and infrastructure where the real impact falls. But even if we do assess this purely as an access road, it should still be rejected on 3 key grounds. Firstly, the proposed access road connects, as you've seen, onto Ockway, a relatively narrow private road designed and built for a specific number of homes. It was not designed to support heavy construction traffic, and the management plan for privately maintaining it to a safe standard did not account for an additional 234 households using it multiple times a day. Funneling additional unplanned for traffic from 234 new houses onto this narrow private road will create bottlenecks, restrict visibility, and compromise safety. Increased traffic will impede access for emergency services, a critical consideration considering that Ockway is currently the sole access road into Oxford Park. The officer's report dismisses these concerns by claiming that it is anticipated that Ockway will become publicly adopted highway at some point during development. This is a distinct case of déjà vu. Appendix J of the Transport Assessment for Oxford Park in June 2018 clearly stated that Ockway would be adopted by Surrey County Council. That never happened. Relying on the same empty assurances this time around is simply not good enough. Allowing the application in its current form provides no firm commitments for how these roads can be maintained to a safe standard. Secondly, insufficient protections have been put in place for the construction phase. The officer's report says that details for how construction traffic will be managed will follow if permission is granted. That's the wrong way round. The necessary protections on HGV routing, delivery hours, contractor parking, road condition surveys, and enforcement need to be part of the decision-making process. Voting against the application today will ensure that Waverley, that you are represented at the public inquiry and can influence what conditions are set to avoid overwhelming local roads and communities. Thirdly, the National Planning Policy Framework clearly sets out under its Promoting Sustainable Transport guidance that new developments have a real responsibility to identify and pursue opportunities to walk, cycle, and use public transport. Building an access road for 234 houses in the proposed location does precisely the opposite. As you saw, it adds a major junction to an otherwise unbroken pathway that provides a safe walking route for local Oxford Park families currently taking their children to school and nursery by foot, and to workers currently walking to bus stops nearby. Without additional safety measures, there's no crossing. This further development will deter rather than promote sustainable transport. You're not being asked today to decide the Secretary of State's case. You're being asked what Waverley would have done. I believe that Waverley would not have approved this access without clarity on how Ockway can be safely maintained for traffic it was never designed to support. Waverley would have demanded construction controls. Waverley would have properly assessed and mitigated for sustainability impacts. I ask you there to resolve that Waverley would have refused, or would very least have put stronger SO16 requirements in place. You should have a voice at the council and the inquiry. Your residents, your constituents need you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Paul Galgi. You also have up to 4 minutes from when you start.
Good evening, members. My name is Paul Galgi. I'm a director at Planning Potential and act as a planning consultant to the applicant Ash Hill. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. As has been clearly set out in the Planning Officer's report, the determination of this application now rests with the Secretary of State following its decision to call in this and the related application submitted to Guildford Borough Council, which sought full planning permission for 234 dwellings, including 50% affordable housing, together with means of access, internal road network, parking, public open space, including play space, landscaping and associated works. In May 2026, the Secretary of State extended its call-in powers to include planning applications for 150 dwellings or more, which is subject of resolutions to refuse planning permission, in doing so allowing closer scrutiny of proposals that are seeking to address the acute pressures of the housing crisis. Following GBC's notification of its resolution to refuse planning permission, the Secretary of State promptly exercised its call-in powers, meaning that both applications will be subject to a costly public inquiry in the autumn of this year. The works that were subject to WBC's own determination prior to the Secretary of State's call-in are minor in nature, relating to vehicular access to Ockway and associated pedestrian access routes into the main application site. These works were agreed with officers to link the proposed development with the existing Oxford Park development. The delivery of these works will be linked via Section 106 legal agreement to a prospective planning permission on the adjacent GBC site. This is an established, legally sound planning mechanism for determining cross-boundary planning applications. The main application to GBC was subject of a collaborative, iterative pre-application process with extensive input from GBC's planning, design and conservation officers, the County Highways Authority and other statutory bodies under a planning performance agreement. We were pleased to secure a recommendation to approve planning permission from officers accordingly. While GBC's officers resolved to refuse planning permission, this was based on only one substantive reason for refusal, that the proposed development does not meet the definition of grey belt and would result in harmful urban sprawl. This matter will now be considered a public inquiry. A completed legal agreement would address the other recommended reasons for refusal and indeed was in draft form when the application was heard by GBC's own planning committee. The Section 106 heads of terms included healthcare contributions, education contributions, and a package of wider highways improvement works agreed with Surrey County Council. While it is not the intention to discuss the planning merits of the Guildford application, it is important to recognise that the application for approval was made by officers with all technical matters fully resolved, including all highways-related matters agreed with Surrey County Council. Indeed, SCC have provided formal comments on the application before members tonight, confirming they hold no objection, subject to the planning conditions set out in the committee report, which are agreed in full with the applicant. Your officers have confirmed that they would have recommended the planning committee grants planning permission for these minor access works, and we therefore hope you agree with this recommendation, noting that in any case, determination now sits with the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker is Mr. Andy Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Godalming Town Council has serious concerns about this application and in particular about the way it must now be considered in light of the Secretary of State's calling letter. Paragraph 7 of that letter is important. It makes clear that this is not simply an isolated access application, but one that is linked to the main housing proposal at the land east of Easham Lane. The two applications are therefore part of the same wider development story and must be considered together. That is why Waverley Borough Council should not stand back from the matter. It should set out its position clearly and without ambiguity. If this linked development is to proceed, then Waverley must ensure that its response reflects the full consequences for Godalming, not just the narrow technical issues of access or process. Again, that linked position is important. The real issue here is not just access, but the cumulative impact of development on Godalming and the surrounding area. This proposal does not sit in isolation. It comes on top of other significant growth nearby, including newly built and recently approved large-scale housing developments. Together, these schemes place more pressure on local roads, schools, recreation facilities and community infrastructure. Godalming is concerned that the discussions around S106 provision may already have taken place between the applicant, Guildford Borough Council, Surrey County Council and Waverley Borough Council, but there was no input from the community most affected. If that is the case, it is highly regrettable. Local planning gain should not be defined without first seeking the views of those who live here and understand the pressures on the ground. The people of Godalming should not be expected simply to absorb the impacts of development without having their needs properly heard and reflected in the planning response. The applicant's own case relies on local community facilities in Godalming, including the community building with Oxford Park, as well as the nearby Scout and Guide facilities. Yet the council that owns and operates Oxford Park, Godalming Town Council, has not even been consulted, nor has there been any meaningful offer of support towards the ageing Scout and Guide facilities. This is not balanced or community-led approach. So while the lack of engagement with Godalming Town Council is regrettable, the principal point is that the development will take real will place real pressure on local infrastructure, and that pressure must be properly recognised and addressed. Waverley Borough Council must take a clear position on the linked application and on the associated housing development, and it must do so in a way that reflects the needs of the area most directly affected. If this application and the associated housing scheme are to be supported, then there must be meaningful planning gain for the area most affected. Godalming. There should include support for education provision, including secondary schooling at Broadwater School. There's been no indication about the plans for a new running track at the school. That needs funding. Improvements to recreation and youth facilities and mitigation for transport impacts that will fall on Godalming's already stretched road network. This is not a case of where broad assurances are enough. The cumulative impact of development in the area is substantial, and the response from the local planning authority must be proportionate, local and transparent. If the development is accepted, then the infrastructure to support it must follow, and it must follow where the impact will actually be felt. For example, the SO 106 provides support for Surrey Police. Surrey Police support should come from increased tax base, not from SO 106. SO 106 should be about local infrastructure. Godalming Town Council does not object to the development in principle, but it does insist the growth must be matched by infrastructure, that the community most affected must be properly heard. Godalming therefore asks Waverley Borough Council to respond to the paragraph 7 of the call-in letter with clarity, to take a definitive position and to ensure that any approval is secured only on the basis of fair, local and meaningful planning gain. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions on clarity? No. So members, it's open now for you to debate.
Relationship with 106 is because everything is so single.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
So members, you've heard quite a lot from the speakers about the relationship and interrelationship between the application, the assessment of impact, and what may or may not be secured through a legal agreement. Members, as you are aware, legal agreements secure the mitigation that is required to make a development acceptable. And the mitigation that's identified is that through consultation responses and dialogue between the infrastructure providers, i.e. the health authority, police, education and highways. So members, in terms of the Guildford application, so that is a substantive application that generates the pressure on the infrastructure, and that pressure is looked at across a geographical area and not across an administrative area. The contributions that were sought as part of the recommendation for the Guildford application included healthcare contributions, police contributions, early years contributions, affordable housing, an on-site car club, a travel plan, a contribution towards a traffic regulation order on Eashing Lane to take it to a 20-mile-an-hour zone, and a contribution towards improving digital demand response bus service, and also restriction of occupation of development until the Oxford Way vehicle access and pedestrian access had been delivered in accordance with the agreed programme. So this is this application. Biodiversity net gain, management plan of open space management company, and 106, BNG monitoring. So those are that is the package of mitigation required to make this development acceptable. And obviously that mitigation in part sits within the administrative boundary of Godalming. Waverley, I meant. So members, in terms of what you are being asked to consider this evening, it is the red edged area. And obviously members, you will need to take a view whether those access points generate need for mitigation that is not been identified within the substantive application. The cumulative impact of development across Godalming has been fully assessed as part of the assessment made by Guildford Borough Council of the residential development. So I know it is quite complicated when it's a cross-boundary application of this nature, and it has been made more complicated by the Secretary of State exercising his new powers to call in applications of over 150 dwellings. But hopefully that gives clarity to what you as a planning committee are being asked to consider tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to start by saying it would appear that this development is the access and the exit is straight into Godalming and using Godalming's infrastructure. But I think what the head of planning is telling us that the mitigation and the contributions that mitigation will bring will be cross-boundary, geographical. So that is extremely reassuring. On another point, one that was raised by the speakers, is the road itself, Ock Road. Certainly, it wasn't constructed for this weight of traffic. So I think at the very least, this committee should consider adding a condition to approval, if we decide to approve, that this road receives a condition to protect and maintain it to a certain standard. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very worried about this. I didn't like the sentence in the report that somebody brought up that, you know, one of our reasons for agreeing this is that that would save us going into the inquiry. But I think we should be there. I mean, this is the point I would make. Many of the people being affected by this, it's going to be cross-boundary, which is good, I accept that. But, you know, the effect is going to be on the borough that we represent and the residents that we are supposed to be working on behalf of, if you'll pardon my grammar. And, you know, to me, we have to be there because we cannot rely on anybody else. At least I don't think we can. We at the very least have to be in the room, and we have to make sure that what we are saying and what Guildford is saying is one and the same thing with one and the same outcome. And I would be very loath to pass anything tonight which took away our responsibility when it comes into inquiry and our ability to make representations to the Secretary of State on behalf of our residents and the borough we represent. So I have severe reservations about just nodding this through. I think I think the implications for Waverley and the residents of Waverley are just too great. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
So, members, just listening to those comments, I think that you do need to consider as a planning committee whether or not there is planning grounds to object to the access, because as a council, there's nothing preventing involvement in the public inquiry, but it may not be that you're defending a reason for refusal on the application before you, which is some access points. So members, I think you just need to be mindful of the decision you're being asked to make and not cloud it with the role you might want to take in a public inquiry, because whilst they're related, they could be slightly different roles in that you are being asked to make a decision this evening is there planning harm caused by the proposed access, not is there planning harm being caused by the proposed development, because the proposed development isn't before you as a planning authority for consideration. That has already been decided by Guildford as the planning authority. I hope that makes sense because it is quite a complicated situation.
Councillor Coburn.
I could just come back on that because it is the access that is worrying me. We've had other examples of this where we've had a development built out and then somebody's come in later for access across it, and it changes the whole nature of the previous development and very often affects the amenity of the existing residents. And, you know, I've spoken before about this because I think we have a duty to protect future residents, but also to protect existing residents. And there's no question that these points of access are going to have a bearing on our residents. It's the access that worries me, not the development.
Councillor Gale.
Along the same lines as what Councillor Coburn has just said, actually, I know the area quite well, and the roads are designed for those bits of housing that are there now. They're all fairly new, and everything is quite open plan. And when I've driven up through there, I've seen that people's children are actually playing on their front lawns. There are no fences or anything like that, and they've got access across the roads as they are. So if we allow the access into this other site, which obviously we're not talking about how much is going on in that site, but we're allowing an access into it, we are actually harming the amenity that our residents already live in. The roads are not designed to take another 200 and whatever houses traffic. It really is going to be a very big impact on the people living there now. And I think that's what we should be looking at, whether it's 200 houses or whatever. That's neither here nor there, but those roads cannot take any more. And I think it would be detrimental to the joy of the people that live there, because at the moment it is a very nice area. It's quiet and the children can play outdoors and they have access to a little community house thing there and all sorts of things. They can walk happily, but they won't be able to if we allow the access points to go across those pavements and into something else.
Thank you. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to understand what is the impact of any decision that we take tonight at the public inquiry. As I understand it, we don't have any power to take a decision in this matter because the inspector has called it in fact. So we're not taking any decision tonight. We're just advising what a decision would have been if we had the power to take it, actually. So I'd like to understand, actually, to what extent the inspector will take into account our advisory decision and what is the impact on our residents in Waverley of taking an advisory decision either way. I just don't quite understand that because the inspector will take the decision on behalf of the Secretary of State. What we say will have potentially no impact either way, actually. So I'd just like to understand what's the significance of us taking an advisory decision either way, either for or against this at the public inquiry. Because I sympathise with what Councillor Coburn has been saying, actually. Why should we indicate that we would have approved this? Isn't it better to keep our options open and be able to speak at the people representing us, to speak at the public inquiry based on the evidence that's going to be given at the public inquiry? In that sense, I would be granted, I'd be inclined not to approve this, actually, unless I'm getting this completely wrong.
Okay. So, members, the decision you are being asked to make tonight is what decision you would have made had the application still been legally able to be determined by you. So you need to either confirm that you would have granted planning permission or that you would have refused planning permission. If you decide that you would have refused planning permission, you need to identify your reason or reasons for refusal, identifying the harm, and then that reason refusal will have to be defended as part of the conjoined appeal. So it's a single public inquiry, which is scheduled at the moment as an 8-day public inquiry. So in the normal way that if you were looking to overturn an officer recommendation, you need to articulate what the planning harm is of the access and what your reason or reasons for refusal are.
Thank you. Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. I think this is a messy, complicated situation. And I think the reason it's complicated and messy is because A, it is across authority, not only in terms of Waverley and Guildford, but also in terms of the implications for infrastructure, which is not a borough responsibility. It really is very complicated. However, I think when you really get down to it, what we are responsible for is our response to the impact of access and impact on the highways. That's the primary thing that I think concerns us. And I note that Surrey Highways have no objection, and I really cannot see how we can support an objection when Surrey Highways don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other, Councillor Spence?
I think I would associate myself with Councillor Gale's comments. This is about the potential loss of amenity. And I know that I think in the report it says that there would be no loss of amenity due to the access. But I would have issues with this, and I would suggest that a grounds for refusing this is that it is in contravention of policy DM5 of the local plan. It says that development should avoid harm to the amenity of future occupants and existing occupants. It goes on, but surely creating the access with all the subsequent traffic that will go into Godalming will have an effect upon the amenity of the residents throughout the area. And I think we should recognise that. Thank you.
So there are no other speakers? So there is a recommendation in front of you that, subject to conditions, permission be granted. When lights show, please vote.
Thank you, Chair. That's 2 in favour, no abstentions and 7 against.
So now you have to give grounds that you can agree that support an objection.
Yes. So members, if it's helpful, I'll read back what I think you've articulated the grounds are. The creation of the proposed accesses would generate a significant level of additional traffic. Sorry, it's really difficult to look up and read down, but I will try. Okay, so the creation of the proposed access would generate a significant amount of additional traffic through the existing residential estate of Oxford Park, which would be harmful to the amenities of existing residents within that development and the surrounding residential area. As such, the proposed accesses would be contrary to local plan policy DM5.
Are you proposing that, Councillor Clark? Oh, I beg your pardon, you're proposing, are you seconding, Councillor Clark? You're seconding. So all in favour of that reason for objection, please show.
Thank you. That is 7 in favour, no abstentions and 2 against.
So the objection is carried. We come now to a TPO. TPO 0926, trees on land south of Manfield Park in Cranley. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. The next item for you this evening is to consider the confirmation of Tree Preservation Order 0926 relating to trees on land at Manfield Park, Cranley. The purpose of this report is to consider the objection received at the making of TPO 926 and to determine whether the order should be confirmed. The order protects one area of trees and the officer recommendation is that it is confirmed without modification. So this slide shows the location of the protected trees on land south of Manfield Park. The order applies to the area inside the green dotted line on the plan. Slide 4, it shows an aerial image which provides context for the site's position between Guildford Road, Manfield Park and public right-of-way 344, demonstrating the tree's public location in relation to public spaces. So some background to the order. It was made on the 27th of February 2026 in response to extensive and potentially indiscriminate tree felling. Officers considered there was a credible risk to further tree loss and adopted a precautionary approach to secure protection while the future intentions for the site were clarified. One objection has subsequently been received, which requires committee determination. So photograph 1 is taken from public right-of-way number 344, which illustrates the prominence of the aforementioned retained tree cover and its contribution to the character of the area. Photograph number 2 is taken from inside the site and it shows the extent, again, retained tree cover inside the site on the boundary line. So this is from the north looking south. Photograph number 3 is the other side of the tree belt that you can see from the public right of way from the first image, and that is looking to the west. And then this is in the opposite direction, looking to the east. So behind this belt of trees is Guildford Road, and this is slightly higher than the highway as well. So it's sat on top of the roadside bank. So the planning consideration is that officers are satisfied that the trees meet the assessment criteria for public visual amenity. They're clearly visible from Guildford Road, Manfield Park and public right-of-way 344 and contribute positively to the semi-wooded character of the locality. In regards to expediency, given the recent tree losses, it was considered expedient to make the trees subject to a tree preservation order to protect that public visual amenity. So the reason we're here tonight, one objection has been received. The objector does not dispute the amenity value of the trees or the need for the protection, but specifically the designation, which in this case is an area order. The officer's response to that is that we consider that the use of an area order remains appropriate in this circumstance. The recent clearance activity, also with the uncertainty regarding future relations for the site, justifies a precautionary and comprehensive form of tree protection at this time. The order can be reviewed and refined at any future stage if deemed appropriate. So in conclusion, officers consider that the objection does not outweigh the public visual amenity of the trees and the risk of further loss. The recommendation tonight is that tree preservation order 0926 is confirmed without modification. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jack. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Councillor Clark.
You remembered my name. Well done. Your report, thank you, Jack, talks about potentially indiscriminate felling. Can you just explain why you came to that opinion?
So prior to the making of the order, there was wider tree coverage on the site. And obviously the serving the preservation order restricts further felling without application or without meeting an exception in accordance with the Act.
No further comments. Shall we move to the vote? The recommendation is it be confirmed without modification. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimously in favour, Chair.
Thank you. That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Jack. Our next application is WA 2026-00246 at a sports field in Sandy Hill Road, Farnham. Alistair. Okay, thank you. I lost him along. Thanks.
Good evening, Chair, members. So this is an application at the sports field. It's existing sports field at Sandy Hill Road in Farnham. It's come to committee because it's an application from our Parks and Reserves Green Spaces team. So council application under Regulation 3 and 4 for the construction of a pump track facility and biodiversity enhancements. The site's located northwest of Sandy Hill Road, residential area just to the southeast, including it's 1 to 5 Barry Road and houses in Sandy Hill Road itself. So an aerial photograph here shows the location just with the eye on it there. Land of the North is in the Thames Basin Heaths Special Protection Area, also the SSSI, and that actually extends around to the west, although at a greater distance. This is a photograph from the site entrance. So the pump track would be located just beyond the 2 seats there and to the left of the rather muddy track, which is an informal track that leads straight to the SPA or straight to the SPA and then around side to the right. Just a repeat of the location plan with the blue arrow showing where that existing access is. This is a plan of the pump track layout as it would be. It would involve importation of materials and mounding. So we've got some section drawings here, up to a maximum of 1.4 meters, but mostly lower than that. And yeah, essentially it's intended to provide multi-use for different kinds of equipment, bicycles, scooters, skateboards, etc. Biodiversity improvements, the plan on the right sort of really maps out the different types of neutral grassland and scrub. And then the areas, the plan on the left, an enlargement of the western part of the site, and area S2A, which is scrub, and G1A, which is grassland, would be enhanced and the biodiversity improved in that area to give a net gain of just over 12%. This is just to illustrate the location of the SPA and SSSI in relation to the site, because this was a particular point which needed to be addressed in the application. So we looked at screening as to whether or not it required appropriate assessment. Natural England came back and said, yes, it did require an appropriate assessment, and that was duly completed and sent on to Natural England. Points made within the report, section 14 outline the mitigation that we considered was required. In particular, a barrier around the pump track just to prevent bicycles, BMXs, pump cycles and so on being taken up the track and onto the SPA. So this is just some bits out of that plan which have been enlarged. So this was a proposal put forward quite recently by Parks and Reserves team. It would be to put a post and rail fence, as in the photograph on the bottom right view, around the north and western sides of the pump track. So that's indicated by the orange arrows and the planet extract at the top. Post a 5-bar field gate, just to give access to vehicles required by the council for maintenance. That's the green arrow. And then the enlargement on the bottom left-hand corner shows there would actually be a separate gate. So you'd come in on the existing track and then a separate gate into the pump track, as similar to the one which is in yellow there. So that's the blue arrow on that plan. There'd also be, although not within the application site, but the applicant has agreed with the County Highways Authority, there's some pedestrian improvements there, which would be subject of a separate 278 agreement. There is an update report that just reports mainly on, or in particular, on the latest consultation response from Natural England. So they've come back with no objection, subject to mitigation, which includes the barrier we've talked about here, and the also a pump track management plan, which is on page 164 of the agenda. They've also added a requirement for a construction and environmental management plan. So that's recommended in the update as an additional condition. Also an additional condition there, just to require some cycle parking to be located within the pump track area. There's a couple of errors that have been corrected, or one very small error in section 14 in the update report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Gale.
Just a question on the facility itself. Is there access for emergency services to get in if there are any accidents in there? And I ask because we had this recently on an ups and downs thing in my area, where someone had locked a gate and the ambulance couldn't get in to retrieve someone who'd fallen off of their equipment.
Okay.
So what's there for emergency services?
Yeah, okay. Well, no, yeah, that hasn't specifically been provided for. However, there is a gate at the main entrance, which is in the blue arrow, the detail just at the blue arrow there. The blue arrow is pointing to the pedestrian gate, but just to the right of that, there is an existing gate, and then the vehicles do come along the unformed track, maintenance vehicles, so there would be access to that field gate, albeit that it is a rather rough track there, but it would be wide enough for an ambulance. And my suggestion would be that we just include the requirements that within the pump track management plan, sort of expanded on in one of the informatives of the main report. So I think that would be something for us to be aware of when we're approving that pump track management plan.
Any other question, Councillor Clark?
It's not a question. It's congratulations for the planning officer to get Natural England to allow this in time for this planning committee. It's only taken 6 years to get here.
Thank you.
Thank
A
you.
lot of hard work from the Green Spaces team, I will say as well. They were certainly very busy over the last few weeks.
Thank you. So no other comments? When lights show, you have the recommendation to grant this. When lights show, please vote.
That's unanimous in favour, Chair.
Thank you. So we come to our last application tonight, which is the one to which we all have a certain amount of interest that we should declare. On the grounds we know the applicant. So this one is WA 2026-00852, Lindens, 15 Mount Road, Cranley. Dana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Application number WA 2026-00852 at Lindens, 15 Mount Road, Cranley. It's for the erection of an open-sided canopy. On the left-hand side, we've got the application site outlined in red, and on the right-hand side, an aerial view highlighted in blue. So it's in the build-up area on the northern side of Mount Road, in the build-up area of Cranley. Here we've got the proposed site plan showing where the proposed glass canopy is going to be erected, stone hatched. And we've got an existing renovation and a proposed renovation where we can see the canopy on the right-hand side in blue. This is illustrative CGI of what the canopy will actually look like. Again, it's not on the actual house, it's a computer-generated image. It's an open-sided canopy with posts and with a glass roof. Here we've got some photographs of the rear of the house, and the canopy will be going where the existing freestanding marquee is, although it'll be slightly lower. This is a view towards number 17. The canopy will be obstructed by the existing single-story rear projection and the existing vegetation. And on towards number 13, which will be closer to. However, there is an existing high boundary brick wall that separates the two properties. Therefore, there will be very little views of the canopy. It is considered that the proposal is according with the development plan. The design is acceptable and there'll be no impact on the amenities of the neighboring property. As such, the recommendation is to permit subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? When lights show, please vote.
That's unanimously in favour, Chair.
Thank you very much. So at just after 9 o'clock, we end the meeting. Thank you all.